All new and aspiring property developers face one particular issue, and that's finding land at a viable price to make the project work. That's why I created the Find It course, to solve that problem. So what I'd like to do now is just take you through the Find It course, the elements involved in it, and let you understand how you can actually solve this problem for yourself. So the problem that most people find is that land is scarce. There's too much competition. They've been looking on sites like Zoopla, Prime Location, Rightmove, and it's advertised at a price, but there's so many other people after it. Even if they do properly check it out to discover whether it's a viable piece of land, often it's been snapped up, particularly if it's a good piece of land, before they've really had a chance. And as a result, it tends to be too expensive. And so it doesn't really stack up. So you need to find another way of finding land. And that's really essentially what we're going to discuss. We're going to follow the Build It and Prosper roadmap to finding land. It's made up of 3 phases. That's detect, detail, and deal. And within that, there are 3 stages in each. So there's the planning, sites, and contact, which is essentially the initial part of finding land. And then when you found land, the detail is basically checking out in detail. And then the third is putting your deal together and negotiating a deal and securing it. So we'll just go through that bit by bit now. So the first step, as I said, is detect. And so within that, we need to first of all understand what are the planners looking for. There's no point in looking for land if you don't understand what the criteria is, because most of the land that you're going to be looking at will not have planning permission in place. Now you might be thinking that's a bit risky, but we'll come to that a little bit later, how you mitigate that risk. So you need to understand the planning guidelines, and we cover that in this course. There's things that you need to look out for in terms of its space, how many houses will they allow you on a particular development site, how close can they be to other, what about daylight. There's lots of different issues that you need to really understand, so that when you actually start looking at land, you can intelligently make a quick decision. No, this really doesn't work, or yes, this is a possibility, so that you're really only dealing with prospects that are viable. So you're looking essentially for land that's not on the market, and this is how you avoid the competition. If you identify a piece of land and nobody else is looking at it, then you've got time to check it out properly to make sure it's a viable proposition. And in that way, you haven't got anybody else looking at it. So you haven't got anybody breathing down your neck. You are going to be dealing directly with the landowner themselves, and therefore it's going to be much easier to negotiate a successful deal. Sometimes establishing who the landowner is quite difficult. I mean, land is not like a house. You've got no door that you can knock on. So how do you establish that? Looking at the land registry is one, but what happens if it's not registered on the land registry? Because not all land is on the land registry. It's a relatively new innovation, the land registry. Prior to that, a lot of land was not registered in that way, and it was held in titles which were held by solicitors. So it wasn't necessarily easy. So by doing this, it's like having your own bookshop, and you're able to go there and get the bargains before they go on sale. And very often when you deal with a landowner, they won't necessarily be even thinking about selling the piece of land. Okay, so now we've got a piece of land that makes sense, and we want to check it out in detail. Just a quick call out: if you're interested in exploring the complete property development journey, then grab a copy of my book called You, a Property Developer. You can get that from the site of the same name, propertydeveloper.com. So first of all, is it going to be a viable site? So what do? Well, we need to first of all know what the end value. We call that GDV, gross development value. So in other words, let's say you find a site that's going to take 10 houses. You take the 10 houses and you establish what that area is going to be. So let's say it's 10 houses, 100 square meters. So overall that's going to be 1,000 square meters of built space that's going to be in there. What is the value of those houses when you sold them? So if they sold for, say, 200,000 each, then you're going to have a value there of 2 million. You've got to understand what that figure is before you go any further, because that basically allows you to calculate what the end value is, or at least what the land value is going to be worth. Then you're going to deduct all the costs, and the first cost you actually take, and people always think this is not a cost, and it really isn't a cost in technical accounting terms, but it's the profit. You take the profit off first of all. So let's just take that example. We've got 200,000, 10 houses, that's 2 million. Our profit on that with full planning permission in place should be 500,000. In other words, we should be taking off the profit of 25% of gross development value for properties that have full planning in place at 25%. Now we'll talk a little bit later about why you should also be making a development profit from this as well. So we take off our profit. That's the first thing that comes off that. So now we got 1.5 million left in this example, and then we take off our development costs. So these are all the things that are associated with gaining planning permission, the infrastructure things like bringing gas and water and electricity onto the site. And you need to understand that sometimes this can be, it may seem like these are all in the immediate area, but they're not necessarily in the immediate area, or they don't have the capacity. So you've got to have an understanding of that, and we certainly go into that in detail in the Find It course. So you're looking at all the different development costs, and then you're actually looking at the physical build costs. Now I know from my YouTube channel that the #1 watched video and the biggest question that I get asked is, how much is it going to cost to build a house? Their answer is, I can't answer that, as you will discover if you've watched that YouTube video. But the reality is we show you how to establish it for your area and for your design. So that's kind of what's really important, is establishing what the house cost is going to be as well. So we have a way of doing that. We have a workbook that you work through, and it basically works all these numbers. It's all interconnected and helps you make a proper viability assessment. So therefore, now having done all our calculations, we want to know if it's going to stack up. So we do 3 types of appraisal. We do what we call a desktop appraisal. This very quickly gives us a picture. We don't have to go anywhere. We can just assess this very, very quickly if this is going to stack up. If it passes the desktop appraisal, then it's good to go. So we're just going to take an example here. This is probably like a couple of houses at the most. In this example, 400,000. We take our profit off 100,000, the costs of 250,000. The land therefore has a residual value of 50,000. In other words, it's what's left over from those costs once we've deducted our costs, including our profit. However, something that wouldn't be viable, let's take the same GDV. Our bill profit is clearly going to be the same, but our costs have now gone up by 60,000. And what we've ended up with a land value that's negative 10,000. In other words, this site is just not viable. It doesn't matter what you do, it's just not going to make sense. Because essentially, when you take off all those costs, 410,000, you've actually spent 10,000 in order to build the property, and that's if you got the land for nothing. So it just not make sense. So it wouldn't pass through into the next stage, which is the initial appraisal. This initial appraisal is then visiting the site and looking at certain characteristics. So for instance, what's the type of windows in terms of so like in the roof space? So in the roof space, do they have Velux windows, or do they have dormer windows? Because there's a cost implication on that. Is there slate roofs, or is it concrete tile roofs? Slate roofs are considerably more expensive in terms of material and labor costs, because they tend to have a smaller coverage area, although the slates are fairly good size, there's a lot of overlapping with slates, which you don't get with concrete tiles, so it takes that much longer to lay that, so the costs go up. So it's understanding what the different cost implications for that particular area, and that really requires a site visit. And then you get into full appraisal. This is where you really establish that you've got something that seems to work, and you're then going to investigate it and really investigate it, because you're getting to the point where if it passes this, you're going to be going in with negotiations with the landowner, because you have essentially established that you have a deal. So then now we go to the landowner, and essentially what we're going to do is we're going to present to them our findings. This is why we have established that this is what the land is valued. Now, one of the other things that I said to you just a little bit earlier on is that we're not just looking for our GD, our 25% of GDV. We're looking for a profit from our gaining planning permission on the land. So a piece of land just on itself has a much lower value. When you put planning permission in place, that considerably increases the value of the land. So if you take a field, typically in the UK, we're talking about between £5,000 and £10,000 an acre for a field. Put planning on there and it probably goes up by about 100%. So there's a lot of room for negotiation with the landowner. There's still considerable profit for them to be made, but if you are going to go away and gain planning permission, and you are going to spend that money with no guarantee that you're going to get the planning permission, then you're entitled to at least enjoy some of that profit. And we show you how to present that to the landowner, but also what sort of level of profit that you should be obtaining from that. And so you go into the negotiation with all your facts and figures, and that really helps you, because you're able to say, no, I just didn't pick a figure out of thin air. This is a calculated document. In other words, I have laid it out in the document that here's a calculated figure of why this land is worth this amount of money. And so that helps you in your negotiation process. Now, next is that you need to protect your interest, because what you're actually going to do, and this is part of mitigating your risk, you're not going to purchase that piece of land, but you are going to take out what's called an option agreement. Now, there are several other ways that you can do it. You can do a promoter agreement, which then gives you essentially what you're looking to do is get control of the land. In other words, you're going to spend a bit of money, go away and get planning permission, and yet and yet you're going to protect your interest, because the landowner can't now go away and sell that property. Because the worst thing is they still own the piece of land. If you don't protect your interests, you go away and get planning permission, they're under no obligation then to sell the property to you. So you need to make sure you legally tie up your interests in that piece of ground. And the beauty of this is that you can really get to this stage with very, very little money invested into the project. And it's really about some planning fees, some architectural drawings, and in fact, if you apply initially for outline planning permission, it's a very much simpler application to your minimal outlay, and you secured your interest. You've got to pay some legal costs and planning fees, some drawing fees from your planning consultant, but you've pretty much got in there with a low figure. And once you have planning in place, then the borrowing situation is much easier. And we talk a little bit about how you can bring in private investors if you don't have a lot of money yourself, and how you also can access bank funding. Now, principally the reason that we talk about funding here is because that's going to be part of your evaluation, because that's going to be one of your costs. Unless you've got all the money in order to do this, and even if you do, my suggestion is that you should be at least then taking interest for yourself out of that money, although I actually wouldn't recommend investing all your money in it, even if you're in that luxurious position to be able to do that, because that will then limit your ability to then go in and buy other sites, or at least get involved in other sites, because what you're wanting to do is create a pipeline of sites. So it's a little bit like a conveyor belt. So once you Initially, getting your first piece of land can be a bit of a struggle. It takes a little bit of time, but once you get this moving, you've got a conveyor belt of land and you're moving from one project to the next. And because the way that you actually tie it up legally, it means that you don't have to be putting in large chunks of money in order to do that. So how will you get results? The course lays out everything that you, and I'll come to that in a moment. If you want support, we also offer support under our group coaching. This is a every 2 weeks, should I say, we have a group coaching session. So I'll come back to that a little bit in a moment. So the core course training is actually made up of 11 separate courses. We have those elements that I've described to you, but the reason that there's not 9 courses, there's 11 courses, because we actually spend 3 courses on finding land in different ways. There's actually 50 different ways to help you find land within the course. You get all the systems that we use, you get all the templates that we use, and you get sample agreements, like a sample option agreement. It is all in there. You also get membership of the Find It community. So we have within our membership site a Find It community exclusively reserved for members of the Find It course, and this allows you to talk to other members who are also looking for land yourself, and that gives you that sort of like peer support. As I said before, we have bi-weekly group coaching. It's held on a Tuesday evening at 7 o'clock for an hour. You just show up. If you've got any questions, if you've got a deal that you're looking at, we can help you look at the deal. But also, if you've got nothing, it's a good reason to turn up, because you will learn from what the other participants are asking. So it's a great learning experience. You should be thinking of this as an investment rather than an expense. So if we take our example from earlier, where we had 10 houses going on a site, each being valued at 200,000, which meant the gross development value for the site was 2 million. 25% of that would be 500,000. That would be a significant return on your investment for this course. What would be an appropriate amount? Well, any investment, if you had to pay 10% and get that return, in other words, a 10 times return on your investment, would be an investment that I would be willing to make. That would put the course at 50,000. Now, clearly, the course is not anything like 50,000, and let's even just scale that back, and let's just suggest that you only had one house, and one of those houses, 200,000, the gross development value would be 200,000. At 25% of that would be 50,000, which would then make the course £5,000. It's not even anything near that. So I believe that this represents a great return on your investment, and of course it's something that you can use throughout your property development career and get continuous returns on that investment, because once you subscribe to this course, you have lifetime access to it. But how would you feel when you had found your first development project, or if you've even done it before but you haven't actually maximized the profit? How would that make you feel? So if you're ready to go, you'll find a link on the course page, which will allow you to then access the course and the option to essentially take out the group coaching if you want to do that. The group coaching is a monthly fee anyway, and what we actually do is we give you a month's free trial on it anyway, so you may as well take it. Very easy to cancel, you can self-cancel, so don't worry about that. The Find It course itself, you get a full lifetime access, so there's no worries of that. This is just essentially a roadmap or at least a process map of every part in the land finding process. So it's part of the workbook. It just allows you to look anytime when you're looking at something and you don't know quite where you are, so you're able to then just see where you are in the process. So if you've got any questions at all, you'll find a button on the website that says just book a strategy session, if you want to actually see a bit more detail in the course and let us show you around, then we're happy to do that. Just book a call and we'll be very happy to show you around. If you're on the fence, then you're on the fence, but what's the alternative? Looking for land through the traditional methods, or finding a way that truly works and has worked for our students? It's up to you. I know it's a decision, it's an investment that you need to make if you really want to be involved in property. And so again, all I can say is if you're on the fence, you've probably got questions, book a strategy session and we'll be very happy to talk you through them. Final thing, you can do this. You know, you really can do this. You don't need any particular smarts to be able to do this. We have all sorts of people. We have people who are professionals, they're accountants, solicitors, working for government, working for Parliament. We have people who are in the trade. We have people who from all walks of life. There's no special skills. What there is a requirement to work through the process. It is a process and the process does work. However, the big question about is whether it works for you. It will not work for you if you don't put the time and effort in it. You gotta commit to this. And I'm not going to tell you that it's easy, because it's not easy. Land is genuinely scarce because of our planning system, but it is doable. This is how we find our land. This is how students who have come on this course have found land. So it's not a process that just works for us, it works for our students as well. Anyway, thank you for watching this hopefully kind of short video, 20 minutes I think, somewhere around about there. Again, if you have any questions, please book a strategy session with us, and we'll be very happy to show you around the course and also answer any of your questions. Thank you. Take care for now. Bye-bye.